Coming home. Qowl. A voice. 2. Son of God. This day I bring you forth as your father. We could, and almost did, make an entire meal out of what Yahowah inspired his son to write in the opening refrain of his second song. It's become obvious that God isn't a proponent of man's propositions. With the exception of Daud and his son, Solomon, and only in Yisrael, no government has been authorized or established by God. And even then, Yahowah only acted after the Yisraelites rejected his Shabat judges. Having made the decision to follow in the ways of the Gentiles rather than being Torah observant, God figured that since they were insistent on a king, his preference for a shepherd might set a good example. This, of course, means that Paul lied in his repulsive letter to the Romans and again in Hebrews, as did the Roman Catholic Church, which grew out of his perverse doctrine. God is as opposed to government as he is to religion and as opposed to militaries as he is to conspiracy. He disdains these human contrivances because they are counterproductive and self-serving, having been created and perpetuated by the worst among us. It also means that the rabbis are wrong when they become political, as is the case with the parasitic haredim in Israel. Reprising Mizmor 2:1 before we move on to the second refrain, Daud wrote, "For what reason, lama, why, toward what end and for what purpose one should ask, do noisy and confused throngs of scheming rebellious Gentiles gather together to conspire in open defiance, ragash gowan, do vociferous and disorderly crowds of restless religious, political, and militant ethnicities estranged from Yisrael rise up vehemently to hastily agitate in fellowship with one another, with races attempting to be noticed and gain attention through their perceived and contrived plots. Creating a disturbing commotion as part of an unrestrained cult of worshippers by hurriedly conceiving and promoting clandestine conspiracies. The people of these nations who are transformed while massing under an antiquated and unifying religious, political, and conspiratorial leader, YAHOWAH, these groups who associate and gather together under an individual who changes them in some way as a result of primitive and arcane concepts, choose to plot and speak, haga, are driven away by their choices and utterances, having wrongly decided after selectively searching, muttering their musings aloud along with their imagined grievances and personal beliefs, all formed after giving considerable attention to isolated information to scheme to remove the people who are the focus of their complaint, Qowl imperfect Joseph, in vain, deluded in their fantasies, RYQ, by promoting their unreal claims and worthless myths for absolutely no reason, revealing their unfulfilling and empty lives and dissatisfaction with their situation. These uninhibited scoundrels brandish idle plans, puffery and dreams, and attack to their disadvantage." With this thought-provoking question and earth-shattering statement reverberating in our minds, let's see where Daud goes with this. The rulers, Melech, the governmental leaders, of the earth, Eretz, the material realm and land, solely on their own initiative, continually set themselves up, Yatsab, prominently present themselves without justification or authorization, take a stand and defend themselves, serving only themselves, thereby committing themselves, Hitpiel imperfect, consistently on their own initiative, without any outside influence, authorization, justification, or authority. Those who govern, Razan, those in command claiming primacy of authority and an esteemed status, lay a foundation to conspire and rebel, Yasad, have from the beginning schemed to rise up through their association, establishing a base, Nifel perfect. Those who govern will not only conspire at some point in time, they will suffer the effects of their rebellion, altogether, Yachad, in a united fashion, against, Al, because of, in front of, and over and above, Yahowah, Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his Haya, existence and our Shalom, reconciliation, and, Wa, against, Al, because of, in front of, and over and above, his Mashiach anointed, Mashiach who, one demonstrably set apart for his service using an application of olive oil as a symbol of his set-apart spirit to demonstrate his authorization and authority. Mizmor/lyrics to sing/Psalm 2 verse 2. There are those who claim that God has chosen the leaders of nations and that he is guiding them. They would all be wrong. They have always been wrong. And in this case, the Hitpiel mood serves as proof, revealing that they have acted on their own initiative. While there is considerable justification to seeing conspirators in every religious and political scheme and of seeing men manipulating the system for their own personal advantage, they have been so open about it and insistent upon it, that the amalgamation of religion and politics is hardly a conspiracy. Throughout the long march of civilization, there has been a solitary unifying theme: clerics and kings have supported each other's claim to divine sanction. They have typically been inseparable, with the emperor serving as head of the government and with the clerics crowning the king. In imperial Rome, the Caesars were worshipped as gods, as was the case in Egypt with her pharaohs and Babylon with her kings. Beginning with Emperor Theodosius in 400 CE, at the point that imperial Rome became indistinguishable from the Roman Catholic Church, each successive despot throughout Europe would claim that they had God's authorization to rule. What's not surprising about this is that religious and political schemes have always been two sides of the same coin. They are human contrivances designed to achieve the same result, to concentrate authority, power, control, property, and wealth among the few. And they were all conceived to be compatible, to work in harmony with one another to create a system that would be difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to break free. Trapped within it, the masses are like cartoon characters in Flatland, incapable of envisioning what lies beyond their imposed reality. It is why Yahowah could not find a single individual through whom to convey his message for thousands of years. There was no one sufficiently capable and courageous, rational and literate, willing to break free of these integrated control mechanisms and risk everything to expose and condemn those who not only claimed to have God's authorization to govern every aspect of their lives, but who held all of the weapons and armies to wield them and controlled the police, judges, and prisons. In such a world, there were no Noaches, no Abrahams, no Yaakobs, no Mos, no Yahushas, no Shamuels, no Dauds, no Haushas, no Yashayas, or Yirmias. No one, not a single individual, was receptive to listening to Yahowah and going where his words led, which would be in abject conflict with what everyone else believed. So perhaps now, from this perspective, we can better appreciate why Yahowah pleaded with his people not to follow in the ways of the Gentiles and their nations, to refrain from being political and religious. But it would not be easy. The web of lies is so intertwined, and we have all been influenced and indoctrinated, even manipulated like Lot, so ensnared by these deceptive and deadly human contrivances that even when one among us would find reason to cut a spinneret, there would be hundreds more, all sticky and interwoven, all designed to immobilize prey seeking to walk away. Keep in mind, these webs were spun to be unseen, its web of silky smooth bonds ensnaring and entangling the unobservant victim. And yet, the tensile strength of these spiders' webs, like those found in nature serving as a metaphor, would be greater than the same weight of steel and even more elastic. Those who would struggle against them would wear themselves out, and they would become ever more ensnared in these convoluted traps. Those who witnessed others' rebellious fight for their freedom, pursuing a way out, only to die a public and excruciating death, would be dissuaded from doing likewise, deterred from rebelling and seeking to flee the control apparatus. What's surprising here is that the religions which claim the Psalms are inspired by their God played such a damning role in all of this. All anyone had to do to expose their malfeasance would be to point out what Dowd wrote in the second Mizmor Psalm. But it would never be that simple. Those who wrongly claim God's authority are never persuaded otherwise, even by God's own words. And the masses confined and twisted up in their binding web of lies are seldom if ever receptive to a reality other than the one they have been conditioned to believe. The webs of politics and religion, like those of social customs and conspiracies, are filled with holes. Each spindly thread is easily broken. But there are so many of them within these interwoven control contrivances because they have been designed to integrate almost every aspect of the human experience, that without an unbridled passion to be free, a fully functioning neshama conscience, and divine direction, most people not only remain trapped, they don't even know that they are constrained. Moreover, those who break the bonds of religion are typically ensnared by a political scheme that is no better. Thinking that they are going from faith to reason, they simply find themselves trapped in a different web of lies. It is the story of Abraham seeking Yahowah's help with his nephew, Lot, of what the entangled and ensnared got right and wrong. It's about 4 individuals who, with the guidance of Yahowah's messengers, finally broke free of Sodom, representing modern Moab, before it was destroyed, who would later reject the guidance offered to them by the messengers which would have taken them home. Moab is all around us. We have become like Sodom. Even on a planet with 7 billion souls, fewer than 7,000 will break free of this web. It took the perfect storm for me to break out of the interwoven web of politics, religion, economics, societal customs, patriotism, conspiracy, and militarism. I not only lost my business, a public company, due to the deceitful machinations of the most religious employees, I was publicly crucified in the media, severing my faith in the religious, economic, and journalistic institutions upon which the nation was built. Shortly thereafter I became disenfranchised from politics, patriotism, and the military, especially after getting to know George W. Bush and then witnessing the revolting carnage of 9/11. I saw the president act as he told me he would, counterproductively invading 2 uninvolved nations, fundamentally changing the world for the worse and bankrupting the country, all on a web of lies. Then adding to the perfect storm, I had to walk away from a psychotic father and an abusive wife, eroding the myths of family values. Free of every sticky and silky spinneret, I was like Abram after he had walked out of Babylon. Unlike Abram, however, while there was a Torah to read, it was so poorly translated that it wasn't nearly enough to embrace the truth. Worse, it was hidden beneath a mountain of New Testament and Talmud deceptions. I was still living in the world Qowl and Aqaba had woven, not the one in which Dowd had so brilliantly expounded. But as I pursued the connections between 9/11 and Islam at Yahowah's direction, I discovered an insight that profoundly changed my life. Pondering why Allah, who is Satan, would denounce Satan in his Quran, I came to understand what Yahowah had revealed about the adversary in his connections with Babylon in Yashayah 14. Satan despises his depiction as the adversary because it precludes him from his prime objective, which is to be worshipped as the god of religion. The final bond that needed to break was Shaul, another man who admitted to being demon-possessed. Having witnessed the binding and entangling strands of religion and politics, of economics and militarism dissolve, and having come to understand the source and purpose of the matrix, I was free to do as Noach and Abram, as Moses and Dowd had done, which was to actually listen to what Yahowah had to say and then act upon his guidance. Over the ensuing 22 years, we have come a long way by never venturing off course, and by always trusting Yahowah's testimony. As a result, the path out of Moab, out of Edom, and away from Ammon, this exodus from Mitzrayim and Babel to the Promised Land has been more clearly marked and illuminated. The Ness banner is being comprised, and Yahowah is lifting it up to call his people home out of the 3 Babylons. From the onset of coming home, I have presented the interactions between Yahowah and Dowd as father and son. This approach is particularly relevant now because, in addressing the response of political and religious leaders toward their relationship, Dowd spoke of it as being over Yahowah and against his Mashiach. This means that from their perspective, to rise up against one was an attack on the other. To claim supremacy over Yahowah, as the religious have done with Hashem, Jesus, and Allah, has engendered a hostile response from his Messiah. To denigrate the son is to disparage his father. And yet, it is by robbing Dowd of everything Mashiach who, his Messiah portends, both in Judaism and Christianity, even Islam, that the religious have schemed together through their scriptures to lay the foundations they would use to defraud believers. In Judaism, HaMashiach is an unknown individual for whom they wait, not Dowd. By denying the fulfillments of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in year 4000 Yah, and then by ignoring Shabuah and replacing Teruah, then inverting the purpose of Kippurim, rabbis have plundered Yahowah's Mashiach of the respect he has earned. Equally egregious, rather than admit that the founder of their religion was wrong, rabbis have doubled down on Aqaba's dim-witted scheme of venerating the false Messiah, Bar Kokhba son of a star, by ascribing that same star to David. In so doing, there are two prominent flags in Israel, one emblazoned with the Star of David and the other the Chabad Mashiach featuring a yellow field, red writing, and a blue crown. As a result of Paul's machinations, Dowd was robbed of his HaMashiach and Ben Elohim titles to create an object of worship in the man-God Jesus Christ. His name and that of their religion is a direct attack upon Yahowah's Mashiach and Ben and, therefore, an attack upon God, himself. As Dowd's inspired testimony has, and will continue to demonstrate, Father and Son, YAHOWAH MUSIC work hand in hand, side by side, to achieve salvation and reconciliation through the Micro-EY on behalf of the Berith. The simple truth is that the Berith is God's family and Dowd is his firstborn. And for the rest of us, the singular means to approach our brother and father is through the invitations to be called out and meet, which Father and Son fulfilled together. It isn't until we come to appreciate this relationship, why, when, and how it has led to this most favorable resolution of our guilt, that we truly know YAHOWAH and Dowd. And in this light, a nameless Mashiach, the perception of unfulfilled Moedim, the advocacy of Jesus Christ, a New Testament, or a Talmud is an affront to the Son and an attack on the Father. One of the interesting things about being Mashiach, anointed, is that the recipient is separated and set apart from all others, and, thus, cannot be seen as integrated into a popular religion or body politic. At the time this was written there was only one man who had been Mashiach, anointed, by YAHOWAH, the author of this psalm, Dowd David. To be Mashiach in the most positive and authorized sense as YAHOWAH defined the concept, one has to be anointed in olive oil at YAHOWAH's direction. While Dowd represents the truest sense of the word, as is the case with most Hebrew terms, Mashiach isn't necessarily an endorsement. YAHOWAH used it in conjunction with Cyrus, the Babylonian king, who lived and died as a pagan estranged from God. While never anointed with oil, he was called Mashiach, but only as a tool to be wielded to gain the attention of a wayward nation. The good news here for Yisrael is that God's people are being led to see this as it once was and remains, as the choice between YAHOWAH and Dowd on one side and the adversary and religion on the other. The Mashiach anointed they are being asked to accept is the shepherd and the lamb, as well as the king of the millennial kingdom. The beloved son of Yah is Dowd. He is not unknown nor is he the Christian Messiah crafted in the image of Dionysus. There is another problem, also of a religious nature, causing Yisrael to reject Dowd. According to the acclaimed prophecy in the 9th chapter of Yashayah, the Son of God, his Mashiach, is a Gibbor, a mighty leader and gallant warrior, who has and who will once again conquer Yisrael's Goim enemies, unify the kingdom, and bring peace to the land. It was in the Babel year of 133 CE that Akiba transferred these attributes to his warlord, Simon Bar Kokhba, fooling many in Israel to follow him to their doom at the hands of Rome. But what they have all missed is that Dowd was and will be that Mashiach anointed Messiah. Far more egregious than this is the realization that the reason Akiba foisted this false Messiah on Jews was that he was seeking to justify Judaism's failure to recognize that Dowd had come to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in the Babel year of 4000 Yah. To pronounce that Bar Kokhba was HaMashiach was to denounce what Dowd had done. It was the most egregious crime ever perpetrated against God's people, and it was committed by the founder of Judaism. There was a first, a second, and there will be a third coming of Dowd, the Son of God and his Messiah. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam the religious have misconstrued the first and misappropriated the next two. And to do so, they must deny what Dowd wrote in these Mizmor, particularly the 22nd through the 31st, as well as everything Yashayah, Isaiah and the other prophets had to say about him. The truth is as obvious as words allow. It is the religious mindset that is opposed to them. The Torah proclaims that the Shabat celebration of Sukkah, following God's return, will be the millennial kingdom of Dowd. We are discovering that the world will be united against the man YAHOWAH chose to save and guide his people, the man who explained how to properly observe his Torah and then lived it. More than any other, it is Dowd's name and words which are on the Nes banner YAHOWAH is raising that will call his people home. Dowd knows that man seeks to control while God seeks to free humankind from religious and political control. He understands that we must be free of human dominion before we can participate in the covenant. So, at this time, Dowd, YAHOWAH's Mashiach, is asking his people to break our allegiance to all forms of governmental and religious control. Will you join us? Let us choose of our own volition to break and pull off, nathak, to snap off and tear away, being set free and purged, separated from by bursting free of, peel in perfect cohortative, their bonds which trap and ensnare, eth mosrahem, that which binds and immobilizes, their spinnerets and tethers, their fetters, shackles, and chains, and thus religious and political restraints, man's yokes which control and tame, and, desire to cast off and throw away, shalak, reject, cast away and fling, hyphal cohortative imperfect, from us, min, anaknu, their twisted and interwoven threads which bind and immobilize, aboth hem, their fibrous ropes and cordage, their intertwined web of silky and sticky spinnerets which fasten and tie, that which they can twist and pervert to harness and control. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 3. To my knowledge this has never occurred in all of human history. Dowd is speaking prophetically of our present day, hoping that Yisrael will listen to him and remove the twisted, interwoven, and entangled threads which bind them to human institutions. It is only once this is done that any of us, including Yisrael, can return to YAHOWAH. As an interesting insight, just as there are religious, political, and militaristic, economic, societal, and conspiratorial schemes, most spiders have 6 spinnerets which they can manipulate independently or in concert with one another. These spinnerets are not simple structures with a single orifice producing a single thread but, instead, highly complex structures of microscopic spigots capable of twisting together and combining these nearly invisible filaments. Without doing so, the independent silk threads would be weak and useless. In life, God has given us a metaphor through which to understand the interwoven web of human Babel. Beyond this, spiders extrude silk from their spinnerets to do more than build webs designed to ensnare other unsuspecting insects, imprisoning those they trap. They construct silken galleries for their own protection, using their spinnerets to distribute their sperm and expand their brood. They even weave cocoons for their metamorphosis. If you are reading this, and have not done so if you are still political or religious, pull off everything that binds you to man's control mechanisms and throw it all away, especially that which is, aboth, combined and twisted, in Babylonian fashion, to bind and control. It is a simple truth, and yet one which is in conflict with everything we have been indoctrinated to believe. To be free we must be apolitical, neither voting nor submitting. To be saved, we must be anti-religious, neither believing nor participating. To be right with God, we must acknowledge what is wrong with man. There is no path to the covenant, no way into heaven, no means to salvation that is accessible through any religious or political scheme. It isn't until we free ourselves from their bonds that we are free to know and approach Yahowah. He will not allow us to drag that muck into his home. Recognizing that those Yahowah is laughing at are those who have conspired to oppose him and ensnare his people, we read. He who inhabits, establishing his dwelling place, Yashab, he who sits and restores, lives and renews, in the heavens, Ba Hashemayim, in the spiritual realm, holds them in contempt and will pulverize them, Sachak, mocks and scoffs at them, lacking any concern over rubbing his enemies away because he disrespects and disdains them, seeing them as a source of derision over whom he scoffs, Qowl imperfect. Yahowah, Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our shalom, restoration, ridicules their foreign behavior and mocks their unfamiliar language, Yag Lahem, scoffs and disparages their unintelligible stammering and holds them in derision, Qowl imperfect. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 4. For most of human history, God has ignored the political and religious mumblings of man. The lone exceptions have been when it either occurred in the promised land or the suffering of his people became too great for them to bear. What we have not seen is Yahowah scoffing with disdain over the ridiculousness of man's behavior and unintelligible stammering. So, yet again, this is prophetic of the days leading to his return when evil reaches a menacing crescendo. I rather enjoy laughing along with father and son, even of us being entertaining to one another, but none of us should ever want Yahowah or his Messiah to laugh at us, to disrespect, mock, or ridicule us, as the world has done to them through their religious portrayals. So now, after enduring millennia of this, father and son are seen responding to the world's religious leaders, especially those who are misleading and oppressing their people. It is, however, more appropriate than we might imagine. It was early one morning at the base of Mount Choreb while Moses was transcribing the Torah with Yahowah that the recently liberated children of Israel were led astray by Aharon. At his direction they fashioned the molten metal bull out of the jewelry received from the Egyptians and started, Sachak, laughing and playing, before it, in essence, contemptuously mocking Yahowah and disrespecting him. Shemoth/Exodus 32 verse 6, what they did, and what political and religious leaders are saying and doing today, is contemptible, even laughable. Nonetheless, the idea of God being amused that our leaders actually believe that they have the authority or ability to speak for him, and of him toying with them, even laughing at them, is frankly uncomfortable. But if we were to put ourselves in their shoes, it is how we would react if we watched an imbecilic imam blow himself and his class of would-be terrorists to smithereens in a case of premature detonation. Further, Yahowah should hold those who have claimed to speak for him in contempt for subjugating his people and denigrating his son. And he has every right to pulverize them for centuries of oppressive religious and political behavior. It should not be surprising that he ridicules their strange behavior and mocks their unintelligible statements. It will be no laughing matter. Then, at this time and place, he will communicate, expressing himself, Dabber, he will make statements, speaking, Peel imperfect, toward them, Elhem, in their direction and against them, showing his frustration and resentment, Afhu, in his overt animosity and resolute anger, and in his burning indignation, Charonhu, demonstrating his intense hatred and resounding anger, will overwhelm and bewilder them, Bahalhem, causing them to tremble by terrifying them, Peel imperfect. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 5. This is again prophetic of what we should expect in year 6000 Yah, in the fall of 2033 on our Roman pagan calendars. Here we find God holding those in leadership positions within society accountable. Before sending the religious and political authorities who misled his creation while claiming to represent him off to their eternal incarceration, he is going to excoriate them. So much for the "judge not lest you be judged" theory. We are reminded that those who extol the fear of God will come to tremble before him. Those who commend love without hate will come to experience the nature of righteous indignation. And for those who have worshipped a religious God, they will find the real one bewildering. The first sentence of the first chapter of the first volume of Observations reads, "Hate is a virtue." This idea is in such discord with modern Moab it was likely shocking for most readers even though the argument on its behalf was rational and moral. And yet, throughout our study of Yahowah's testimony, we have been constantly reminded that God not only hates, he is continually teaching us to express our righteous indignation toward those who harm his children and mislead his people. This is but one more example. And like father, like son. What follows could be in Yahowah's voice, but I think it reads more naturally to make the transition where Dowd announces it. So, while all of 2:6 could reflect God speaking through Dowd to us, since the next sentence is unquestionably in Dowd's voice, and the citation is clearly from Yahowah, this is likely Dowd's intent. I, myself, have offered leadership, any Nazak, and I have exercised my authority by being a capable leader and pouring forth guidance, Qowl perfect, providing counsel through my governance, Melech any, providing my advice to consider and respond to as the authorized ruler and designated authority, through my kingship to ponder, upon, alongside, Sion the signs posted along the way, Sion, the instruction on the signposts identifying the proper direction and marking the place. Where the aspirations of the covenant are known, my set-apart mountain, Har Kodesh Eni. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 6. The integration of Dowd into the lyrics of his own psalm at this point is important because he is telling those living today that he has provided guidance in this regard that we'd be wise to consider. Dowd was Mashiach anointed by Yahuwah and, thus, the leader with God's unquestioned and designated authority to provide counsel for humankind to ponder. And there is no question that Dowd took his role seriously, pouring out God's guidance through every word he wrote. To a great extent, it is Dowd's lyrics which were inscribed on the signs posted upon Mount Sion. He revealed and then led the way to God through the lyrics of his psalms, most especially the 19th and 119th on the Torah and the 22nd and 88th during his fulfillment of the YYV in this same place. Sion is as much Dowd's as it is Yahuwah's. Both had homes built there. There may be some who think it is unseemly for Dowd to express himself in this way, as there is no hint of humility in these words. But he is exactly as he ought to be, pridefully and accurately taking credit for his role in bringing man to the covenant through the Torah and for the unique place he earned with God. Our work on Yahuwah's behalf, our willingness to expound upon what Dowd has done, should be important to us. And following his example, we should expose and condemn man's ways while sharing Yah's words and his ways such that it becomes a source of great satisfaction. I have come to appreciate Yah's love affair with his son, recognizing that Dowd not only wrote the lyrics to observe and celebrate the Torah, but that his life exemplifies the Torah's purpose, to right the wrong and perfect the imperfect. But even I had not considered the full scope of what Yahuwah has chosen to give Dowd, the earth and perhaps even the entire material realm. It will all be part of his kingdom. That is not to shortchange the rest of us. As Yah's most beloved child, as the chosen leader of his people, reflecting his father's nature, Dowd will freely share with the rest of the family what has been given to him. Moreover, while the earth is big, and the universe larger, they are infinitely smaller than our future home in the seventh dimension. Also, when we come to appreciate the subtleties of the Messiah's earliest revelations, we will recognize that he was speaking of fulfilling the Moedim when discussing the leadership and counsel he offered upon Sion. Everything leads to this conclusion, and nothing leads away from it. I appreciate the way Dowd wrote this introduction. He realizes that in spite of all of his flaws, the characteristics which endeared him to Yahuwah were his intellect, passion, courage, confidence, and character. His capacity to reason enabled him to understand and then brilliantly write the insights he derived from the Torah. These attributes earned him a special place, one which is so spectacular. Dowd wants us to know that it was by father and son working together that so much was accomplished. I will choose to account for, proclaiming in writing, Saphar, I will, of my own free will, record and recount, putting the decree into effect by informing through written communication and documentation, Peel imperfect cohortative, the decree and prescription for living, Chalk, the clearly written announcement on that which cuts us into the relationship, of the Almighty, of God, which Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah. Instructions regarding his Haya, existence and our Shalom, reconciliation, said, Amar, declared, Cal perfect, to me, Eni, of me and regarding me, you are my son, Ben Eni Ada. This day, Ha-Yam, at this time and in the light of day, I, Eni, bring you forth as your father, Yalad Ada, am responsible for you as a father gives birth to and raises a child such that they grow, bearing and assisting you. Mizmor 2:7. Feel free to ask questions about this, seeking to learn the answers because literally out of me/me and from me/me, Sha'al min Eni, of your own free will choose to inquire and request from me/me, questioning why, Cal imperative, there will be an inherited share of the land of the Gentile nations that will be given to you and unto successive generations, Gowan Nakla, Ada. Part of your inherited property and heritage will come from places that are not part of Yisrael, even unto, the distant reaches of the earth, perhaps even the material realm, spirits, the ends of the earth and the finality of the region, becoming your property, a chuza, Ada, a gift to you, a place which belongs to you. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 8. Dowd wrote the second Mizmor psalm, so this was said of him. From God's perspective, and that is the only one which matters in this regard, Dowd is Yahuwah's son. Yahuwah is Dowd's father. And as Yahuwah is most beloved, his firstborn, Dowd David will be receiving the lion's share of his father's inheritance. This also explains why, upon Yahuwah's return, the kingdom of Dowd will be re-established, and not a democracy in Israel. But it goes far deeper than this because it was only Yahuwah's Bakar firstborn who could properly experience the Mikra of Bikurim following his fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah. Collectively, these Moedim provide Yahuwah's prescription for living. And in this case, by serving as the sacrificial soul during Chag Matzah, Dowd was in a position to offer his people their inheritance. And this is why I wrote me/me. I wanted you to be aware that just as this could be in recognition of what Yahuwah is offering his son, it is also true that this is what his son has enabled for all who celebrate his sacrifice. As is the case elsewhere, in the second Mizmor psalm, we find irrefutable proof that Dowd David is the son of God and Yahuwah's Messiah. And just as it is presented in Yashayah Isaiah 9, it is Yahuwah who is offering his son to us. Further, when we look back to the previous statement, this day is directed toward what occurred when Dowd led the way home on Sion as he fulfilled the YYV. In fact, the very reason Yahuwah made this declaration this way, saying that, I will bring you forth as your father, assisting you, is so that we would come to appreciate how these psalms and Isaiah's prophecies work hand in glove. One explains the other, working together to frame the perfect picture. This proclamation was also made so that we could confidently trust everything Dowd David has to say about Yahuwah, his Torah and covenant, about Yehudah, Yisrael, and most especially the YYV. He knows what it means to be observant and understand what God is offering and expects in return. Further, when we understand the kind of familial relationship Yah and Dowd experienced, we now know that we, too, can come to enjoy the same kind of father/child bond Dowd established with God. This day, that Yahowah is bringing forth his son is prophetic, just like the rest of the second Mizmor psalm, of his second coming and third coming, of the fulfillment of Bikurim and Kippurim. It wasn't just Daud's work as a songwriter but as a savior and future king. Yahowah is affirming that he is bringing his Ben son and Mashiach Messiah forth to fulfill Chag Matzah and his Melech king to reign over and defend Yisrael at the end. Therefore, the realization of a second coming and third coming are true when applied to the right Mashiach Messiah and Ben son. Coming back down to earth from this elevated thought and lofty position, it is telling that with respect to living with God and pleasing him, we are reminded that Daud was unabashedly critical of those who were wrong about Yahowah. Perhaps we should be as well. It's appropriate, even desirable, for us to expose and condemn those who, in leadership positions, lead many astray. Fundamentally, sha'al means to question, to inquire and ask about, to look and search for answers. Therefore, Yahowah isn't telling Daud to make this request of him but, instead, he is encouraging him, and therefore us, to choose to inquire about the reasons God is doing this with Daud. The overriding theme of Yahowah's discussions with Abraham focused upon the Tinakla, inheritance, God intended to give to him. And as we know, Abraham's inheritance, one that would be passed to successive generations through Yitzhak and Jacob, and thus to Daud, was the land of Yisrael, albeit the territory Daud would come to control was much larger. It included the three ancient kingdoms whose modern manifestations play a significant role in tomorrow's prophetic fulfillments. These include Moab, which is indicative of Pauline Christianity and multicultural socialist secular humanism, Edom, representing Roman Catholicism, and Ammon, which depicts Islam, along with portions of Pelasheth, Palestine and Aram, Syria. This actually affirms something we learned while dissecting every word Yahowah shared with Abraham. Remember when Abraham broke down and complained, saying that he did not understand the purpose or nature of the inheritance Yahowah was offering because he didn't have an heir? God took him to the spiritual realm, not around the earth, and then revealed the benefits of being transformed into light. In other words, Abraham's inheritance was to become a perfected and eternal being who was empowered, enriched, and enlightened. And it would be God's work with his son that would make this so. To a lesser degree, Yahowah was announcing this on Daud's behalf so that we'd understand a prophecy he would make through Zechariah centuries later. After revealing, I shall cut off the pride of the Palishti Philistines. I will remove his blood out of his mouth and his filthy idolatrous abominations from between his teeth, which is prophetic of God dealing with the wannabe Palestinians in the aftermath of the final Islamic assault against Israel. The enemy with whom Daud was most successful in mitigating would come to inappropriately camp out near my house, because of he who returns, such that no oppressor shall pass through any more. He who returns is the same man who has and will once again camp out near Yah's house, Daud. Then in Zechariah 9:9, and as a result of the one who is returning, Yahowah encourages Yisrael to exuberantly rejoice, gyl ma'od, manifest to the greatest extent possible a joyful attitude over the extraordinarily favorable circumstances, singing jubilant songs, shrieking ecstatically, Qowl imperative, daughter, Bath, of Zion, signs posted along the way, choose to shout for joy, Ruah, exclaim in triumph, blowing the shofar trumpet to signal the upcoming event, Hifel. Imperative, daughter, Bath, of Jerusalem, source of teaching and guidance on reconciliation. Behold, Hina, look up and pay attention, your king, Melech Ada, your leader and sovereign ruler of a kingdom, is coming to you, Bow, La, Ada, will arrive, returning for you, pursuing you, approaching you. He is right, just, upright, and vindicated, tzaddik, correct, righteous, in accord with the standard, innocent, acquitted, just, honest, accurate, and fair, and what's more, Wah. He provides deliverance and is saved. Yasha, who, he is victorious and protective and provides salvation, Nifel, he provides and receives salvation, both straightforward and unpretentious, any, not arrogant or prideful, even humble, having been afflicted and oppressed, from Anna, providing answers to questions and proper responses, declaring information which elicits a reply, continually singing, putting lyrics to melody. His dominion and likeness, Moshel who, his reign, authority, government, influence, rule, and similitude, is from, Min, sea, Yam, to, Ad, all the way up to and as far as, sea, Yam, and from the river, Wa Min Nakar, to the ends of the earth, F. Sparrots. Zechariah 9 verses 7-10. Since this is addressing the daughters of Zion and Jerusalem, not the Gentile nations, your king coming to you, excludes the possibility that this is speaking of anyone other than Daud. It is addressing Daud's return to reign over the millennial kingdom, at which time he will inherit the earth, from sea to shining sea. It's beginning to look a lot like a third coming after all. Staying with Zechariah a moment longer, and addressing Daud's second coming and third coming. And, Wah, for a time, I will pour out, Shapak, I will provide an outpouring and build upon the house, Al-Baith, on behalf of the family and home, of Daud, the beloved, of the 1076 occurrences of DWD. This was one of the few in a prophetic text scribed DWID, adding a Yod representing the hand of Yah, and upon, Wah, Al, also on behalf of, those who dwell in, Yashab, the inhabitants who establish their abode and remain in, Jerusalem, the source of guidance. And teaching on reconciliation, a spirit of compassion and acceptance, Ruach Chen, the spirit of favor and mercy, of a beautiful and beneficial spiritual garment, Wah, for those requesting mercy and clemency, Takanim, of being treated with kindness and affection, with compassion, from Chanan, mercy and favorable treatment. Then, Wah, they will be able to look, Nabat, they, at this time, will be equipped to observe, focus upon, pay attention to, and regard, think about and then appropriately respond, to me, El Eni, accompanied by the one who, F. Asher, with whom by association, and to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, they had reviled and pierced, Dakar, they had thrust into by driving sharp implements completely through, Qowl perfect, and, Wah, they will lament, Saphat, they will sob. expressing their genuine sorrow, Qowl perfect, over him, Alhu, just like, Ka, similar to the way, one cries, Misped, one shrieks and howls, over the most uniquely special child and valued life, Al-Hayakid, for the only son, from Yachad, who reunited and joined together, anguished and infuriated, Wa grieving furiously, angry and enraged, even frantic, over him, Alhu, on his account, consistent with, Ka, the anguish suffered over, Marar, Al. The frustration and rage endured over. The firstborn, Habakkuk, the first son born into a family. Zechariah/remember Zechariah 12 verse 10. When read from this perspective, Yahowah's statement should bring tears to our eyes. Rather than recognize the Passover lamb was the Son of God and Messiah, God's people watched as the Romans tortured him and then they denied him. Should anyone feel a bit shortchanged at the prospect of Dowd inheriting the lands occupied by those estranged from God, and perhaps much more, I'd like to share what I learned long ago. There is something far better than owning large estates, luxurious yachts, and fast airplanes, and that is being close friends with someone who does. That way you get to enjoy them without the headache of managing and maintaining them. Moreover, the universe is a very big place, so there will be plenty of room for everyone to play and explore. Moreover, by voluntarily fulfilling Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim, Dowd earned everything Yahuwah is offering, including our respect. To begrudge the Bakar firstborn of his inheritance after what he endured to make Bikurim firstborn children possible is to be ignorant of his sacrifice. The concept of Dowd being God's firstborn son is only presumptuous outside of Chag Matzah, where it is the natural consequence. Further, Dowd was the first and only person about whom Yahuwah said, "He is my son and I am his father." Adam was the Creator's creation. Noach was his maritime mate and, thus, captain of his Arkansas. Abraham was God's friend. Yitzchak, based upon his name, was a source of laughter and, thus, a playmate. Jacob was the father of his people. Moses was his liberator, the implement and scribe Yahuwah used to draw his people out of harm's way and take them to the promised land. Yahushua ben Nun, Joshua, was his exterminator, preparing the land for his people by ridding it of its pests. Shamuel was his most judicial prophet. Dowd, however, was all of these things and more, God's beloved son, and the man who walked where none dared tread to facilitate our salvation. The next statement could be in Dowd's voice or remain in Yahuwah's. If God is continuing to speak, it would suggest that he will work with Dowd as he cleans house and removes those infected by the six-pack of human ills prior to his return, religion and politics, militarism and social customs, conspiratorial claims and economic schemes. He may also be saying that he will use many of the Mizmor and Mashal Dowd has written to shatter the evil nature and mistaken ways of these individuals and institutions. But far more likely, this next statement has returned to Dowd's voice, with the prophet conveying what Yahuwah has revealed he will do to fulfill and facilitate the previous promise. Yet either way, it is interesting to see where this is leading. You shall break up their evil nature and shatter their mistaken ways, Rahem, you shall destroy their wickedness and tear asunder their inclination to mislead, while smashing and splintering their pastors, with an iron staff and scepter, Ba Barzel Shebeth, with a rod, stick, or club as a smelted iron implement, as if they were, Ka, like, a potter's, Yautzer, someone molding earthen objects out of clay, vessel as a means to contain and control, Kali, implement to imprison based upon one's longings, container to constrain and annihilate, object of desire and weapon to possess, and yoke to tame and direct based upon one's gut instincts and emotions, from Kala, Kali, and Kalya, means to accomplish something, to determine someone's fate, to exhaust and consume them causing them to cease, to perish, and to vanish, even imprisoning them, finishing them by failing them, destroying them emotionally, and then, you will shatter and separate them, Naphat's hem. You will break up their fragile and brittle objects, destroying them. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 9. Prophetically, the beast of Rome was comprised of iron and clay and thus with the mention of an iron staff or scepter, even a molten metal rod or stick, these are such odd things to construct out of lead, we are led to consider Yahuwah wielding Dowd's legitimacy against the illegitimacy of this beast, especially as Rome has evolved into and become manifest in Roman Catholicism, the European Union, and the United States. That is especially so with the mention of a scepter, something that belongs exclusively to Dowd as king of a united Yisrael. What Yahuwah will be shattering to facilitate Dowd's inheritance will be man's means to mold implements of control. He will be liberating his creation. Those who have sought to reinforce their positions and lord over others will discover just how fragile they are when compared to the one they have opposed. But, of course, more than this, by carrying his people's guilt with him into Sheol and depositing it there during Matzah, Dowd broke his people free such that they would no longer be bound by their mistakes. And they cannot say that they haven't been warned. Therefore, now, this being so, henceforth, political and religious leaders, military and government officials, Melech, sovereign heads of state, kings and potentates, presidents and prime ministers, pharaohs and Caesars, choose to be prudent and circumspect, Sackle, under the auspices of free will ponder the implications, show some insight and discretion, consider this principled explanation and be wise. Gaining understanding, Highful imperative, and elect to heed this warning, Yasar. Choose to accept this correction or endure the conditional punishment, demonstrate some personal responsibility in discipline, Nifle imperative, making the rational decision to defend, Shapat, exercising good judgment, lawyers and judges, adjudicators and those responsible for interpreting laws and applying justice to exonerate, Cal construct, the land, Eretz, the earth. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 10. Ultimately, during the last days, it is all going to boil down to one stance on Yisrael. Every political and religious leader, each military and government official, who isn't circumspect in this regard, who isn't choosing wisely and opts to oppose Yahuwah's people and place, will be destroyed. One's patriotism and faith will not matter and will likely be counterproductive. While that conclusion is valid, let's never lose sight of the fact that this continues to be a referendum on Dowd, the beloved son, and his prophetic insights regarding what father and son will achieve together. And it is that very point that Yahowah is reinforcing now at the conclusion of the second Mizmor. With reverence and respect, Yar, in admiration and deference, work with and serve alongside, Abad F, expend considerable energy and intensity to the mission of accompanying and serving with, Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our shalom, restoration, and rejoice, YGYL, and be joyful over the most favorable and delightful situation, to the point of quivering, Ra'ad. Shaking and quaking. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 11. No one did this better than Dowd. His passion to serve was exceeded only by his intellect. As a result, he is our point of contact with the divine. He opened the door and set out the welcome mat so we could come home. And considering the cost and his relationship with God, denying any of it will engender his wrath. And that is as it should be. Father and son work together so that we might live. To have made this sacrifice only to have it discredited by the religious is an unconscionable crime against the people to whom it was offered. As you consider Dowd's next pronouncement, please take note of his use of bar instead of ben for son. To show how unusual this is, bar only appears 4 times while ben is used on nearly 5,000 occasions in the Torah, maybe, wa mizmor. The reasons are twofold. First, what follows is unlike anything we have seen in the Torah and prophets. This next refrain speaks about our perceptions of Dowd, and of the consequence of disrespecting him, which is a life and death decision. We are being told that our fate is subject to where we stand with the Messiah and Son of God. This is because he is our Savior, the one who endured Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim. His sacrifice is the source of eternal life, leading to the perfection of our soul and subsequent adoption into the covenant family. Second, in recognition of how unique this statement is regarding the interrelationship between Dowd and salvation, it calls for the kind of elucidation a special word like bar provides. More than a ben son, the Messiah is bar the radiant and favorite son, the brilliant and purifying heir. Dowd is the Bahar chosen one and, therefore, Yahowah is bar favorite son. Dowd is intellectually brilliant, as we learned, but he is also returning as bar brilliant as the son. Most importantly, by serving to fulfill the Mikra-EY, Dowd bar purifies the souls of the covenant's children. Further, as Yahowah's Bakar firstborn, he is the bar heir with the ultimate inheritance. In addition to son, in bar, we find the illuminating and enlightening child with an inheritance who chose to provide moral cleansing and intellectual understanding. The bar is selected and dispatched to conceive supernatural children who are radiant, fostering favoritism among those choosing to participate in this special relationship as sons and daughters. The bar contributes to the conception of descendants who are bright and pure, akin to cleansed and purified grain, thereby paving the way to an inheritance, to enlightenment, and to comprehension. The bar is a son and a whole lot more. Reach out and touch, contacting as a sign of affection, demonstrating your mutual adoration for the relationship, nashak, passionately brush up against and be seen together with, even kindle a fire alongside and kiss to demonstrate your affinity for, with the radiant and favorite son, the brilliant and purifying heir, bar, the illuminating and enlightening child with an inheritance who chose to provide moral cleansing and intellectual understanding, selected and dispatched to conceive. Supernatural children who are radiant, fostering favoritism among those choosing to participate in this special relationship as sons and daughters, contributing to the conception of descendants who are bright and pure, akin to cleansed and purified grain, thereby paving the way to an inheritance, to enlightenment, and to comprehension, lest, pen, to eliminate any apprehension that, he becomes indignant and displeased. Anaf, he becomes angry and averse, and you perish, Abad. You are destroyed, ceasing to exist for having squandered the opportunity by wandering away, Qowl imperfect. In this way, Derek, in this manner. For indeed, ky, because, his righteous indignation, afu, his resentment and animosity, can be kindled 72, baar, can be ignited and caused to burn, for a few and for very little, miat, for a trifling few, comparatively, ka. Joyful with me and blessed by me, Asheri, fortunate in the relationship with me, stepping along the straightforward and correct path which gives meaning to life with me providing the proper place to stand and live as a benefit, a compound of Asher, to benefit relationally with any, me, are all, Qowl, is everyone, who put their trust in him, Chasa ba who find the safe place by relying on him and confiding in him, seeking refuge along with him. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 2 verse 12. Dowd is no longer being subtle. It is by relying upon what he has done that we are blessed. And it is in denying his role in fulfilling the Mikra-EY, as is the case in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that souls die estranged from God. The Messiah made the ultimate sacrifice, and for having done so, he has earned and deserves our respect. He saved everyone who answers the Mikra-EY and accepts the berith. Those who benefit from both not only recognize and appreciate what he has achieved, but also, we come to love him as we do his Father. When we put this in perspective, we see Dowd having volunteered to accomplish the most magnanimous and courageous act in human history, then announcing it throughout the lyrics of his Mizmor psalms. And by contrast, we find his people, Jews, as a result of their rabbis, denying everything he said and did. Almost as troubling, we find Gentiles creating the world's most popular religion by corrupting and contravening the Messiah's accolades and accomplishments. This juxtaposition of right and wrong, beneficial and counterproductive, truth and deception, has never been this extreme. Therefore, the line father and son have drawn in the sand, the distinction between life and death, is predicated upon our position on Dowd. This being the case, let's acknowledge the now obvious and profoundly important truth, second only to the Torah and prophets, nothing is more essential to knowing God than Yada Yahowah. These books, from an introduction to God to Babel, from goddamn religion to Twistianity, and especially Coming Home, are irrefutably at the forefront of God's message to mankind. This herald is the first and only voice where these insights regarding Father and Son, our Messiah and Savior, are boldly disclosed. And all of this is vehemently denied by the founders and advocates of Judaism and Christianity. As is the case with the one true God positioned against thousands of impostors, so it is with Yada Yahowah standing alone, one voice against billions. God has never been popular. He seldom works through many, preferring to handpick his prophets and messengers. To deny what Father and Son accomplished during Chag Matzah, and what they will achieve together on Kippurim, rightfully engenders their angst and disgust. To embrace what they have done, and to appreciate them for it, opens the door to life within the relationship they fostered. From the first word of the first Mizmor to the concluding phrase of the second Psalm, we are connected through Asheri, the first-person expression of all. Asher represents for those engaging in a relationship with the Father through the Son. Dowd has a way with words. No matter if you prefer to render nashak as kiss or reach out and touch as a sign of affection, even brush up against, each requires the physical presence of the aforementioned Mashiach, anointed Messiah and Melech King, who is Bar the favored son who brilliantly perfects those with an inheritance. It is becoming increasingly difficult to overlook the obvious. We are witnessing the second coming and third coming of the Son of God, the Messiah, the King of Yisrael, Dowd, Yahowah's beloved. Furthermore, with Father and Son, it is all about understanding and accepting Dowd's role as the Pesach Isle along with his soul's fulfillment of Matzah and Bikurim. And this is because there is no other way to extend our lives, perfect our souls, or become part of the covenant family. Since Dowd is going to be king of the millennial kingdom, it is a bad idea to annoy him. To deny him now is to forego living with him then. One of the many reasons Yahowah loves Dowd is that he views the world in terms of white or black, right or wrong, good or bad. He isn't into concessions or compromises. It doesn't take much corruption or inaccuracy to rile him up. The truth is the truth, the Torah is the Torah, Yahowah is Yahowah, and Dowd isn't willing to accept even the slightest variation from that which is right. It has been an amazing journey, one comprised of ideas and words, which has taken us from the worst of man to the best Father and Son have to offer. Here is a recap of one of the greatest songs ever written. For what reason, one should ask, Lama, do noisy and confused throngs of scheming and rebellious Gentiles gather together to conspire in open defiance, Ragash Gawim? The people of these nations who are transformed while massing under an antiquated and unifying religious, political, and conspiratorial leader, YAHOWAH, choose to plot and speak after selectively searching, muttering their musings aloud along with their imagined grievances and personal beliefs, Haga, in vain, deluded in their fantasies, while promoting worthless myths, RYQ. Mizmor 2:1. The rulers, Melech, of the earth, Eretz, solely on their own initiative, continually set themselves up, Yatzab. Those in command claiming primacy of authority and an esteemed status, Razan, lay a foundation to conspire and rebel, Yasad, altogether, Yachad, over, Al, Yahowah, Yahowah, and, Wa, against, Al, his Mashiach anointed Messiah, Mashiach who. Mizmor 2:2. Let us choose of our own volition to break and pull off, Nathak, their bonds which trap and ensnare, Eth Mosrahem, and, Wa, desire to cast off and throw away, rejecting, Shalak, from us, Min, Anaknu, their twisted and interwoven threads which bind and immobilize which they use to twist and pervert, harness and control, Abathem. Mizmor 2:3. He who inhabits, establishing his dwelling place, Yashab, in the heavens, Ba Hashemayim, holds them in contempt and will pulverize them, Sachak. Yahowah, Yahowah, ridicules their foreign behavior and mocks their unfamiliar language, Yag Lahem. Mizmor 2:4. Then, Az, he will communicate, expressing himself, Daber, toward them, Elhem, showing his frustration and resentment, Ba Afhu, and in his burning indignation, Ba Charonhu, he will overwhelm and bewilder them, Bahalhem. Mizmor 2:5. I, myself, have offered leadership, Wa Eni Nazak, providing counsel through my governance, Melech Eni, upon, Al, alongside, Zion the signs posted along the way, Zion, my set-apart mountain, Har Kodesh Eni. Mizmor 2:6. I will choose to account for, proclaiming in writing, Sapar, the prescription for living that cuts us into the relationship, Chak, of the Almighty, El, which Yahowah, Yahowah, said, Amar, of me, El Eni, you are my son, Ben Eni Ada. This day, Ha-Yam, I, Eni, bring you forth as your father, Yalad Ada. Mizmor 2:7. Feel free to ask questions about this, seeking to learn the answers because literally out of M/me and from M/me, Sha'al Min Eni, there will be an inherited share of the land of the Gentile nations that will be given to you and unto successive generations, Gawim Nakla, Ada, even unto, Wa, the distant reaches of the earth, perhaps even the material realm, F. Eretz, becoming your property, Achuza, Ada. Mizmor 2:8. You shall break up their evil nature and shatter their mistaken ways, Raahem, with an iron staff and scepter, Ba Barzal Shebeth, as if they were, Ka, a potter's, Yautzer clay, vessel as a means to contain and control, Kali, and then, Wa, you will shatter and separate them, Naphatzhem. Mizmor 2:9. Therefore, now, Wa, Ada, political and religious leaders, military and government officials, Melech, choose to be prudent and circumspect, Sakal, and elect to heed this warning, Yasar, making the rational decision in support of, Shapat, the land, Eretz. Mizmor 2:10. With reverence and respect, Ba Yar, work with and serve alongside, Abad, Eth, Yahowah, Yahowah, and rejoice, Wa Gyl, to the point of quivering, Arayat. Mizmor 2:11. Reach out and touch, contacting as a sign of affection, demonstrating your mutual adoration for the relationship, demonstrating your affinity, Nashak, for the radiant and favorite son, the brilliant and purifying air, Bar, lest, Pen, he is perceived as indignant and is displeased, Anaf, and you perish, Abad, in this way, Derek. For indeed, Ky, his righteous indignation, Afhu, can be kindled, Baar, for a few and for very little, Miat, comparatively, Ka. Joyful with me and blessed by me, Asheri, are all, Qowl, who put their trust in H/him, Chasa Bahu. Mizmor/song to sing /Psalm 2 verse 12. Depending upon how we interpret these words and what we decide about the one fulfilling them, this is either wonderful guidance for our day or something so monumental, it takes our breath away. Yada Yahowah.